Ever catch yourself, kind of lost in thought about rewinding the clock or maybe getting a glimpse of what the future holds? I don't know about you, but with all the time travel shows and movies out there these days, it's hard not to get sucked in. The whole idea is just, it's fascinating. But today, we're diving into a story that claims to be more than just, science fiction. We got these excerpts you sent over talking about something called Project Pegasus. And let me tell you, they're really something. They were originally in Spanish, and the whole thing centers around this lawyer, Andrew Basiago. And his claims, well, let's just say they're not exactly your typical history lesson. Basically, Basiago claims that as a kid, he was part of this super secret government program, Project Pegasus. And he says they were doing a lot more than just like playing war games. He says they were using some seriously advanced tech, stuff he claims was based on Nikola Tesla's work to actually send people through time. And get this, one of the most interesting things he says is that they were specifically looking for kids to be a part of this. Like, they thought young minds would be better at handling the effects of time travel. He even uses this phrase, temporal shifts. He says it felt like for a moment you were just out of sync with normal time.
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? This idea that children might be uniquely suited for an experience like that. You see it pop up in time travel stories all the time. It speaks to, I don't know, maybe their adaptability, their willingness to embrace new things, maybe even a certain innocence that would allow them to accept something as impossible as time travel.
Exactly. Now, get ready for this because it gets even wilder. Basiago's not talking about just like hopping back a few years to mess with your past self or anything. He's claiming he was there at Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, saw the signing of the Declaration of Independence firsthand. I mean, we're talking major historical moments, right? And then he goes even further, saying he met a young Barack Obama during some kind of time travel mission to Mars back in the early 80s.
And that's where this story really shifts, doesn't it? It goes from these fantastical history lessons to something even more extraordinary. This concept of using time travel for political purposes to influence events, observe key figures, a whole other level. It really makes you think about the implications. I mean, can you imagine, right, if someone really could go back and change historical events or like meet someone like Barack Obama before they were, Obama? It kind of throws everything we know about cause and effect out the window, doesn't it? Like how individuals actually shape history.
It really does make you rethink everything. And it gets even crazier because this whole Mars thing, it ties into something Basiago keeps hinting at in these excerpts, like this idea that Project Pegasus wasn't just about looking back at the past.
Yeah.
He suggests they were trying to like prepare for possible futures too, even threats.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? The idea of using time travel as some kind of intelligence gathering tool or a way to get a head start on defense. It's something you see a lot in science fiction, but to think that it could be happening in real life,
Yeah.
it's a whole different ballgame.
Absolutely. And that actually leads us to probably one of the most unsettling things Basiago talks about. He claims that he saw images of the 9/11 attacks like decades before they happened.
Yeah, this is where Basiago's story intersects with this phenomenon that's kind of always fascinated people in, precognition, the ability to actually see future events. He says he saw these images using something he called a chronovisor, which he describes as like a holographic time viewing device.
Okay, so we're talking something straight out of a movie, but he's saying it's real. I mean, what's the science behind that even?
Well, that's where things get really, really speculative. The scientific community, as far as we know, hasn't found anything that would support a device like a chronovisor actually existing. Like, take teleportation, for example. He says he experienced that too. But that would mean being able to map and transfer the quantum state of literally every atom in a person's body. It's just beyond anything we're capable of right now.
Okay, so the tech he describes, maybe it's a little out there, but the idea of precognition in itself, seeing the future, that's something people have been debating for a long time, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. It brings up these fundamental questions about free will versus, like, destiny. If the future is already set and we can see it, do we really have the power to make our own choices?
It's a scary thought when you really think about it. It's like, what if you saw something bad was going to happen? Would you even try to stop it, knowing it might be unavoidable? Would you even want to know? I don't know if I would.
It's a dilemma that, philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. This whole notion of whether we have any control in a universe where the future might already be written.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? And it kind of makes you wonder about Basiago himself. I mean, is it possible that these memories he has of time travel, could that be something else? Could they be? I don't know.
It's definitely something to consider, right?
Yeah.
Human memory It's a tricky thing. It's not always as reliable as we think. It's possible for people to have these really vivid memories, things that feel absolutely real, even if they're not entirely based on, actual events.
So you're talking about like false memories. Could that be what's going on here with Basiago and these wild claims?
It's possible, for sure.
Yeah.
You also have to think about the power of imagination, right? Basquiat's clearly really into time travel. It's easy to see how that kind of passion could influence someone's memories over time.
It's like the line between what's real and what's fantasy, it kind of blurs, especially with something as, I don't know, as mind-blowing as time travel.
Exactly. And that actually brings up a really important point, especially these days. It's about how we approach information in general. With so much out there, so many stories, claims, images coming from every direction, how do we even begin to sort through it all? Like, how do we figure out what's actually believable and what's not?
It's a real challenge, that's for sure. It feels like everyone's got a story these days, and social media just amplifies that, doesn't it? It's like these narratives can go viral in seconds.
Exactly. And that's why it's more and more important than ever to use critical thinking. We have to evaluate our sources, look for evidence, and be really careful with things that just sound too good to be true.
Like you were saying earlier, right? We have to look at things from different angles, check our own biases at the door, all of that. It's easy to get swept up in a good story, but taking a step back, really looking at the details, that's so crucial.
Couldn't agree more. And that doesn't mean, just dismissing anything that seems a little out there or unusual. We always have to be open to the possibility of discovering something new, something that challenges what we think we know.
Right. It's about finding that balance, isn't it, between healthy skepticism and being open-minded.
100%. And, I think Basiago's story, whether you believe it or not, it reminds us of that.
Yeah.
It makes us think about what truth really is, how strong belief can be, and just how important it is to stay curious while also staying grounded in reality.
Very well said. So where does that leave us? We've covered some pretty mind-bending stuff today: time travel, government conspiracies, even trips to Mars. What's the takeaway for our listeners?
For me, it all comes down to asking questions. Don't just take things at face value, even if they come from someone who seems credible. Dig a little deeper, explore different perspectives, and come to your own conclusions.
I love that. Ask questions, always. So before we wrap up, one last question for you and for everyone listening. If you could travel through time knowing what you know now, would you do it? Would you try to change the past, maybe just get a glimpse of the future? And what would you do with that knowledge? That's something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this incredible deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.